And greetings. This is Alexius Poorman and Winnie Arnold, and we're doing miniature dragon review.
With
Doc
a miniature
is,
cast.
yep, with a miniature cast. Doc is
Yeah.
unavailable today, but it's going to be the two of us, and we're going to review an awesome graphic novel.
You were doing. Yes. Okay. So yeah, we were looking. I was looking at what to review, and I had picked up that there was a Comixology about 2 or 3 weeks ago had a post-apocalyptic sale, and I found a copy of Why the Last Man at a ridiculously low price, the first graphic novel, and I heard wonderful things about it, and had always meant to kind of one of the things I always had on my mind. And I figured, well, what the hell, let's do it. Um,
Oh, okay. So
so
I was kind of curious of like part of what your motivation was to pick this
yeah.
book. Because it's always interesting of like sometimes it's the simple fact of this is what's currently going on,
Mm,
or here's something that is new for the simple fact of like, to review
yeah.
because it's something that's recommended or such.
Well, the real reason behind it, I mean, like some of these things, I picked them because it's like, wow, this is just so interesting. Some of them is because it's topically relevant, and some of them are simply because I have a lot going on and I already own it, and I don't have to go buy more because my budget doesn't have room this week. I had to fix my car, again. I mean, it happens. You drive all the time. So, but it is a book that's been very interesting. Like I have wanted to look at this for a while because I keep hearing nothing but good things about it, and it's by the creator of Saga, Brian K. Vaughan. It's the book he did
Mm.
before Saga, and so I think this book has everything to do with why Saga was was so successful, because he had a built-in audience that knew him, and were completely like sold with anything he did. Um, and I've heard a lot of people say that if Brian K. Vaughan wrote it, I'm on board. And I'm kind of falling into that camp myself at this point. The book, basically, the premise is interesting. It falls apart a little bit under inspection, but like the idea being that there's like when this book takes place, there's some sort of a pandemic plague, and at the exact same moment, all across the world, every mammal with a Y chromosome dies. So, like, every man on the planet's dead, but every animal as well. So, like, basically, like 3/4 of the of like or half of all the animal life on the planet is about to go extinct within a few years. And it's an interesting premise, and but it falls apart under inspection because, like, why would they all die? That kind of defies any kind of a premise of like biology, because like a disease would not just simply wipe everybody out on a timer unless there was maybe nanotechnology involved. I don't know. When I read this, I got really hooked on the story and ended up downloading the first 4 graphic novels.
Mm.
I've read them all, and I can say that the book is not about the disease. It's about the people that have to live in that environment. And in that regard, it's a pretty solid story. Because like, it's why the disease did what it did, why it worked that way has never not been revealed. And it doesn't need to be. And because they're not addressing it, it works. Even though the whole premise is flawed, because it's about the people living that environment and their struggles, and the fact that it was discovered very quickly that one man and one male monkey did not die. And that's compelling, and that's a mystery that they still have yet to unravel 4 graphic novels later. So, Alex.
Well, so for me, it was like quite an interesting thing because, when in, I wouldn't say completely blind because it's like I've seen it on the shelves when
Yeah.
it initially came out. But, one of those things of, since there's just so many titles, and when you go to a comic book shop, it's easy to go like, okay, ooh, this cover looks cool, or hey, I've heard about this, or
Mhm.
oh, what the heck, I'm gonna check this out and flip through. And for whatever reason, initially when it came out, I didn't take a look at it. And it's kind of one of those things like I regret it, because
Right.
I really enjoyed this first trade paperback, graphic novel, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed. I mean, I felt it had some characters that felt like they had a really organic feel of like their boneheadedness, their emotions, the reasons why they were doing things, made sense. It didn't feel like it was tropey kind of characters, but it also didn't feel like such a level of archetypes and this is what's necessary. Like we've talked before about how to do like a Shadowrun book, you would have to have the archetype of these type of characters, like the same way that Pathfinder
D&D
had, or D&D has like these
your
very
fighter,
archetype,
cleric, rogue, thief, and warrior. Yeah.
And within this, I think what's really appealing is like that mystery, because you have Yorick, the main character, and Ampersand, the monkey.
Yeah.
And they're
both
the
guys.
two males that, at least at the current moment, are known to be alive. At least I've only read the first graphic novel.
Well, I'd like to point out that without revealing what's coming down the line, you notice that they were in touch with the space station at one point in the story, in the first graphic novel. The International Space Station, which means there are men alive on the space station. They don't reveal it in the graphic novel, but the minute you see it, you're like, of course there's astronauts up there. But see, that's the question. Did the astronauts die too? By being off planet, did they survive the plague? Or did they die in space? And they don't reveal that in the first graphic novel, which I thought that was nice. A nice touch.
Right. I mean, it's like, I think it's one of those things of, it builds such an interesting mystery because it's that kind of level of, like one of the characters says, of survivor's remorse. Of, how did this happen? Was it the characters, their own interactions that actually made this apocalypse? Or was it just the simple fact of like something beyond their level of control? Because it just shows enough within that first, at least in my opinion, of the story, was there's several characters within this that they have things that they're doing. Some of them have direct correlation with that kind of time, the time scale of what's going on. And that's an interesting way of like storytelling too, of like this jumping back and forth.
Yeah, they do that a lot in the first issue. It's another thing about this book I wanted to mention is that I talked with Keenan a little bit before we did the show.
Yeah.
And want to try to get him on, which now I wish he'd agreed because it was, but he also was busy today, so he couldn't do it. But he didn't want to read the book, and because like it's kind of funny, like when I first joined Keenan's gaming group for the 6 months or so I was there, it kind of struck me that all the people there were kind of brand new to role-playing games, and they were approaching it from kind of an outsider's perspective, where they're running around having like sane rationalizations of everything, rather than like encountering people that are just cutthroat and out to get you. And they, it's like they weren't acting like gamers, right? and it's interesting because Keenan's objection to this story was kind of along the line of the way his players were acting. Like, no, in this, Yorick needs to be locked up and forced to have sex with lots of women and make babies because the human race has to survive. And we need to find out if his babies would live or if they're just going to die the moment they're born. And it's like that sort of thing. But the thing is one thing you find out later, right? And this isn't going to ruin anything for the story, but like women who were pregnant lost their babies. Like babies that weren't born also died, and so it's like
why?
Yeah, with the Y chromosome, right? So it's like I don't know, like there may be a lot of factors to this, but the thing is like Yorick's immune. Would he pass his immunity on to his children? We don't know, and you need to find that out at the first opportunity. If like they just never come to, if they never can conceive, then okay, at least you know. But it's like,
right, and well,
you know,
even then there's a problem with that because like on a genetic level, yeah, you have children with say multiple women. The problem would come up is like any of those offspring that would breed with, you know,
right.
such, there
You'd
would
have
be
to,
a certain level of inbreeding because
yeah,
it's like it's the
it's
father,
true.
the same father, but you know, different mothers.
It would be a risk, but if you could, but if every mother is different, it lessens it, you know. But you know, it's where the Adam and Eve thing myth kind of falls apart too, you know. But if it's true or not. But the thing is like Keenan's beef was that they weren't behaving properly, which of course is the same beef that we had with Sliders, because not, you know, in Sliders you would have, if you're lost in parallel universes, you pick one that's technologically advanced, create a new base of operations, and expand from there. You don't just get further lost. But like, or at least that was my beef. I don't know,
Right. But you know, that becomes that
yeah.
level of storytelling versus like you know,
Yeah.
motivation of characters and such too.
Right.
And
But
also it's that kind of level too of okay, they pick a place that looks like paradise, which they've talked about before in that series,
yeah.
and then it becomes that level of okay, you know, we got to stay here a week. This place is not paradise.
Right. Except when they did find paradise, they didn't stay there. Anyways, like, but the thing is like in this one, instead of locking up Yorick in a safe location because he's too valuable, right? And basically farming him for sperm, for lack of a better term, they instead are sending him on a quest to find the answers. And it's like, that's stupid. But at the same time, you know, you have to get the story going, and the reasoning behind it isn't entirely bad, but also it's like the other consideration is, okay, so you're in that situation. We picked the story up like 3 or 6 months or something after the disaster. There's starvation. They don't have the technicians know how to run the power plants, you know, are gone, so they can't keep the power plants running, even though there's really nothing wrong with them. They just don't know how they work, right? You know, they're half the country's starving because they can't get food, and you find out why that is in the 4th graphic novel, which is interesting. But it's like there's all these social problems and society's breaking down. And so it's like, you know, if you're in that situation, it's easy to step back and say, hey, you guys are stupid. But if you're in that situation and you're in a terrible, really tough spot, and, you know, you have to make the best decisions you can, you know, because even the fact of the matter is one man is not going to save the human race. You know, like in 80 years, like 90% of the planet will still be empty. And, you know, at best, Yorick might be good for 100 kids, and half of them will be men. So that's not enough to restart the human race. You need more. And they send him on a quest to basically find out the answers, you know. So, and admittedly, they didn't think they were going to go that far. Like they were basically just running up the street to go get the stuff they need and get the answers, and then come back to Washington, D.C. He wasn't supposed to be in that much danger. Ultimately, it turns into a cross-country trip to California. So, but once they're in that situation,
well,
what are they going to do? You know?
And I think it's an interesting part because it's like, at least within this book, there's a lot of seeds that are planted and also a lot of threads. And at first, it kind of felt like, because it jumps between multiple characters.
Oh yeah.
And kind of showing a little bit of like, okay, before the apocalypse happens or this event, you know, it shows different characters and what they're up to. And then as time goes on, it shows kind of what they're currently doing, introducing new characters, other characters get killed, other events basically going on. And it's an interesting part of like just seeing, you know, part of that reaction of like what currently is going on and various motivations, because it's like, you know, some characters are very selfish within their forethoughts, and then others, you know, it's a place their motivation or their reasons of doing things come from either necessity or looking at kind of a greater good or just, being human.
Well, I have to say, one of the elements I find the most frustratingly compelling, is the Amazons. They don't go into too much detail in the first graphic novel, but they're basically, what they are is they're a group of women who are ultra feminist, and they have a leader who basically believes that men are a plague on the world, and that God wiped out men, and she sees men as oppressors, right? And there's this one point where she in one of the later books where she actually confronts Yorick and blatantly calls him a rapist, even though he's never, done anything like that. Like she just simply is blind and angry, and she basically has all the women. They have a couple of guns, but they're basically running with archery, and she makes the women cut off one of their breasts the way the ancient Amazons did, and they're running basically this crazy biker gang, and they're burning all the sperm banks to the ground to basically destroy any hope of bringing men back to life, even though it also potentially dooms women as well. And it's the height of insanity, because all they're doing is creating an extinction of the human race. They are actively wiping out humanity, and yet these women are under the sway of a charismatic leader. And it's interesting seeing how this goes, because it's like Brian K. Vaughan really understood what he was doing when he wrote this character, because this woman is manipulative, she's evil, she's intelligent, she's charismatic, she's well spoken, she's good looking, she is keeping the women just hungry enough to be kind of like slightly hypnotic, right? And then she comes in, and when they're at their worst, she gives them something to make them feel like she cares about them. She's a manipulator, and she's completely evil, and all these women are just it's like it's like if you get sucked in with a cult, and what a great villain. And I love the way it resolves in the end. It's like things get to a real serious head, and suddenly it's like this sudden thing happens. I'm like, yes. It was so great. I don't want to ruin it for you, but it's also interesting too that this book, like by about the third graphic novel, it kind of feels like all the plot threads have wrapped up, and then it keeps going. It's like all the initial stories, are pretty much wrapped up by the third graphic novel, and yet it keeps continuing in a very organic way because their quest isn't over yet. They haven't reached California. I also, it's interesting too, something else I want to talk to you about, Alex, about this. We got some time. So I had ran across an interview with Karen Berger on Sci-Fi, the Sci-Fi Wire, and I really like that channel because for some reason, the Sci-Fi channel seems to corner the market on interviews with comic book creators and executives, right? But she was the one that basically greenlit this series. She is the editor who was formerly in charge of Vertigo before DC cleaned house, and she moved over to Dark Horse, right? But she was basically the one that essentially started the Vertigo line, and she was scouting out the creators that would basically Hellblazer and Why the Last Man and Sandman, and develop these series. And one of the things that she pointed out in the interview, which I thought was really interesting, because you were talking about, do we call this a trade paperback or a graphic novel? And it certainly is a graphic novel, because each book has a complete story in it, right? And because the first one ended at the perfect point where a novel would end. The story's not over, but that's the end. Like the book ends at a perfect moment, for the end of a novel, right? And what she had basically pointed out is that they were the ones that started the practice of scripting the stories to collect as complete books, because they were collecting a new readership in the comics who wanted people that were into novels and books, because they were producing literature and higher quality stories, as opposed to just, okay, so we've got a Batman book and we're just going to collect like the first 6 issues here into a trade. But they were all one-off stories. They were never meant to be an arc. And this is where the idea of the story arc came about. And so what we're basically reading is like kind of just the point is like they knew that they needed that kind of readership, and eventually that practice was adopted by the industry as a whole. you know.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And so I thought that was an interesting point, because like you read the first graphic novel and it
Right.
basically ends at this point where, like, you know, okay, well, they've their initial quest, their initial journey just got trashed, and they're like, what do we do, you know? And the camera pulls out, you know, and they're in the middle of the street, this empty street, and they're like, oh well, shit. I guess we're going to California, you know. And it's like, at that point they either go back to Washington D.C. or they go to California, and they're already here, they might as well continue on. And I don't think Yorick would ever have been sent out if he was going to California. You know, it's like, oh, we're just running over to Boston, it's cool, you know. So what's your take on this point?
So as story goes, I think can definitely say, based off of what we talked about within the last 20 minutes, I think
Yeah.
both of us have enjoyed the story. It's
Oh
been
hell yeah.
engaging enough for both of us,
Hmm.
where I would say if you like mystery, if you like something that has kind of that, it might be science fiction, it may be, like old magic or something kind of going on behind the scenes,
Hmm.
and some that's kind of a hook onto itself. And on
Yeah.
top of it, I feel like the more important part is the characters are actually interesting.
Oh yeah.
They're well written, and I think that would have fell apart if yeah, the main character Yorick is a bit of a twit, but at the same time,
Yeah.
some of his decisions actually
Oh
gets
yeah.
him into some of the problems that, at least within the first volume, it has consequences, it has repercussions, but at the same time, he's still an interesting character for his faults, and
And
like
I
hearing
want to point
about his
out, by the way,
story.
I want to point out also that you bring that up, that plot point has payoff of his
It,
stupid decisions.
Oh yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's a really smart part of, like, not this just kind of here's a thing because that was an interesting thing to write, opposed to
Hmm.
like, this feels like, in the history books I want this written down, and in the movie version I want Bruce Campbell to play me. And
Or Bruce Willis.
right,
Yeah.
right. But either way, saying that, it's like, this feels like the people actually trying to survive and figure out what's going on, opposed to just like, once again, like I've said, about tropes, or these are character
Mm.
archetypes, things of that nature.
Mm. Well,
Um,
you know that there's been a genre of film that's cropped up in the last 10 years that I call it the pandemic story. You've
mm,
probably seen these, and they're basically about how utterly screwed we are, and it's kind of like a subgenre of disaster movies, I think, where you have like, oh, the asteroid's coming, it's gonna wipe us out, you know. And like the pandemic movies are just literally, okay, well, a disease comes in and we're dead, and I think they only exist to spread fear and terror and make people panic, right? And I wouldn't call this a pandemic story. I think it's a story about people, and I think it's successful for the same reason why The Walking Dead is successful, because the story works under different circumstances. You know, like, if this same story could be about the Black Plague, it could be about a time, like a story could take place during World War II when everything was horrible. You know.
oh yeah, and I would say, like, within uh, from the various stuff that I've read about, like, The Walking Dead from the comic books, and I haven't watched all seasons of The Walking Dead, but it's like one of the biggest things has been the character dramatization, the interactions with these people that are trying to survive,
Hmm.
and kind of like, when they're in this situation, do they keep their various morals, ethics, and idealisms,
Yeah.
or do they need to change because the landscape has changed so much and they have to deal with um, you know maddening problems.
I
But
actually like that the first major crisis in the first book is, do we suspend the Constitution? Like, that was a very cool plot point. Like the senators died, the women who were the wives wanted to become the replacements, and the existing senator, and it's really like most of the Republicans happen to die, a lot of the Democrats are alive, and they're women, and they won't let the Republican wives take the place of their husbands on the basis that we're not a freaking monarchy. And then once you do that, you basically create an inherited leadership, and that's a slippery slope.
So I think we've hammered a lot about story ethics and character design.
We have 5 minutes to go.
How about we go through as art and lettering and things of that nature?
Well, the art was excellent. Lettering. Yeah, the art was excellent. I just re-downloaded the first issue. Like, I had no problems with lettering. I thought it was quality and professionally done. My only gripe is occasionally the letterer changes the size of the font, which I thought that's not really a great decision. But this is this hand lettered, by the way? This is hand lettered though, so he gets a pass. Yeah, this.
So why
this
is that?
book is.
So why doing it with a digital mean doesn't get a pass, but here's a pass for doing it with your hand?
Well, because when you're hand lettering, there's a deliberate inconsistency that's unavoidable. There is some digital lettering in this, but like the all the text is clearly hand lettered, and it is a little tough to be consistent when you're hand lettering. Because like I'm looking at this, like where is it? So I'm looking at a paragraph here, and look at the letter E, and every one of them is different, so it's clearly hand lettered. But I mean, again, like it's pretty high quality. Like the person was consistent, they did a good job, and there were only a couple points where the text was in the wrong order. So it's like, I mean, I really can only find 2 mistakes that I remember off the top of my head in the first graphic novel.
I gotta say, it's like typography and things of that nature, I didn't really notice any kind of mistakes. But then again, I think I was more engrossed with the story, and at least in my opinion about the art, the only thing that I can say was initially it didn't really blow my socks off, but I think it was and I think one of the reasons why both of us have been talking more about the story and trying not to spoil it for anyone that's watching this is that's where the magic is. That's where the part of this this entire book really comes together. It becomes such a great thing, is the fact of like enjoying this great story. The art is good. I don't think it's like anything, like real amazing kind of stuff. Like
I love the cover artist, by the way.
I mean, it's like if it was even done in that style, it's like that would have been all right. But I think this is just one of those really good storybooks.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, totally. It's also kind of funny too, because it's like, okay, well, you're the art side of our partnership, and I'm the kind of like the creative story side, right?
Yes.
But as a letterer, right, it's kind of like that joke that Claire made that I ruined comics for her. Because once I taught her how to letter comics, like her perspective of the industry, like it all changed so much. Yeah. And she like looks at books and all she sees is and she never noticed before. And like for me, it's kind of the same deal where like I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh yeah, I would have done that differently. That's weird. Just it's like, they did it that way. That's interesting. Kind of like I'm enjoying the story, but I also pick it apart, and I can't you can't unsee it once you've seen it. Hey man, we got a minute left in the show, and I gotta get to work.
So final thoughts, Woody.
Oh hell yeah! I've bought the first 4 graphic novels. I'm going to finish the series probably in a couple weeks. I'm so hooked on this. On this, like I love it. I can't recommend this more highly. This is like engaged me on a level I did not expect to be engaged.
And about my final thoughts on this is I definitely enjoyed it, but for anyone that's listening, definitely check it out yourself. Either
Oh,
through
hell yeah.
your local library, go to your local comic book shop, or go online and find a digital copy. But either way, it's like I
Read
don't
it.
think you're going to be disappointed.
That this Christmas is coming. That you could do a lot worse than that. They get somebody this book.
So, do we have any final shout outs, or otherwise it's probably time to wrap this
Well,
into a bow?
let's just wrap it into a bow.
Uh,
Just check us out on social media, Cyber Symbiosis, on Twitter and Facebook, and we're posting new pages this week, so check those out on Twitter, and still haven't fixed the web addresses yet, but check us out on Twitter. You'll find all of our latest pages there.
Thank you very much for viewing. Have a great day. Cheers.
Yeah, bye.